Hey friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we're going to be looking at the new plant-based milk collection from Dimension Nails. So this collection features a brand new milky sheer jellies in a really cute colorway. I'll save more of my thoughts for the end. Let's just get into the swatches. The first polish in the collection is Vanilla Almond Milk, and this one is just your classic, typical milky white jelly. So I know some people, when it comes to whites, they don't want them to be sheer and would prefer an opaque finish. But for anyone who's looking for a white jelly, this is a really great option. On one coat, you do see a little hint of the white, but it's still very thin. So personally, I prefer milky whites like this to be built up in at least 2 or 3 coats, depending on if I want to layer a glitter on top or in between, or if I just want a nice squishy crelly look. So for this shade specifically, I think it looks really nice in 3 coats. It evens out really nicely. It has just a very fresh kind of look to it, and you still can see your nail line, so it's not super buildable like some crelly jellies, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think it looks great. And here is a little comparison shot on 1, 2, and 3 coats. The next shade is Strawberry Soy Milk, and this one is described as a light pink milky jelly. So really quick, I forgot to mention that I'm just wearing a clear base coat under all of my swatches because I kind of wanted to just show how these sheers look over stained nails because I think a lot of us have that. And for a shade like this that has a little tint of pink, it does that really nice job of freshening up your nail again. So on one coat, it doesn't exactly counteract the staining so much, but it really just gives a really nice fresh pop of color. And on 2 coats, I think is how I would probably wear this if I wanted like a your nails but better kind of look. And on 3 coats, it does build up to be, again, a little bit more full coverage, but still very much like a crelly. Like you can still see right through to my nail line. So it's not a super buildable shade, but I think it still looks just really nice and refreshing on 3 coats. This was honestly one that I love on like however many coats that you do, but definitely a classic to have if you don't already have a sheer pink in your collection. The next shade is Chocolate Cashew Milk, and this one is a light milky brown. So I was really excited about this one because I feel like it's very unique to my collection. I do have one comparison to it later, but this one still is very different, and honestly, I like this one a lot more. But yeah, on the first coat, I feel like it wasn't really noticeable on me, so this is one of those shades that I think personally would look better in 2 or 3 coats where it's just built up a little bit more and you can see more of that color. Like on 2 coats, it kind of gives me that your nails but better look, but without being that sheer milky pink. Like this is just very neutral. I mean, I think there is a little bit of warmth to it. I can't exactly tell like if it's warm or neutral, because again, my nails are stained, so maybe having the staining coming through is like kind of throwing off the tone of this polish. But either way, I think it builds up beautifully on 3 coats. You start to get that slight brown tint, but it's not too dark or anything, and it's just really nice. It's, again, very unique to my collection, so I'm really happy to have this. The next shade in the collection is Orange Pecan Milk, and this one is described as a creamy, tropical light orange. So now we're getting into the more colorful side of the jelly collection, but I will say, depending on how you wear this one, this could easily fit with the previous 3 that are more of the classic neutral or sheer shades, because here on one coat, it just gives that slight wash of color that I think could work for negative space nail art or anything like that. But because this one is a little bit on the warm peachy side, I don't especially love it on one coat because it doesn't really do anything for my staining. I think it just kind of emphasizes it a little bit more. So for this specific shade, I think I would like wearing it in at least 2, but more likely 3 coats, just so that tropical shade of orange starts coming through. And I think it's really pretty because there is just a nice warmth to it, but it's still very pastel. So yeah, this one is just really cute. So again, here it is in 1, 2, and 3 coats. Next up we have Banana Hemp Milk, and this one is a light pastel banana yellow. So this one is super cute. We're definitely now in the colorful rainbow side of the jelly collection. And honestly, on the first coat here, we're not off to a great start because it just kind of looks like my nails are stained even worse than they already are. So this is definitely a shade that I think would look a lot better in at least 2, but more often than not 3 coats, just because it gives it that more intentional sheer yellow look. But obviously the other main thing is that I normally would wear this over a milky base coat, like either Mooncat's smoothing nail primer, or even if I were to layer this over vanilla almond milk or something, just to kind of have a little bit more of a blurred base. But yeah, on 3 coats, I think it looks a lot better. The color is definitely very nice and a cute shade of yellow. It's very pastel, but I do like how white leaning it is, because normally the amber leaning yellow jellies just don't look flattering in my opinion. So I think this one looks best on 3 coats. Next up we have Peppermint Hazelnut Milk, and this one is a minty pastel green jelly. So this one is just another really cute shade. I think it's just so refreshing. I love this specific shade of green that it is. And while I may not really love it on the first coat, again, probably because of the staining coming through, I think it does still give it a really even wash of color. So maybe you could get away with it in 1 coat if that's your jam, but personally with these other more colorful shades, I like them built up in 2 or 3 coats. Here on 2 coats, I think it gives such a beautiful finish where it almost reminds me of the sea glass nails. So layering a flaky and then a matte top coat I think would be really pretty, but my favorite is just layering a 3rd coat of this shade because I just really love the color. I think it's so pretty. It kind of reminds me of like that shamrock shake green but it's still very much a squishy shade. And I don't know, there's something about this that I think is just so cute, especially for summer. So again, here it is built up in 1, 2, and 3 coats. The next shade is Blueberry Flax Milk, and this is a light sky blue milky jelly. So this one is another really cute shade in my opinion. I think it looks pretty nice in 1 coat because it just gives that really light wash of color, but I think because of the yellow staining it might kind of have like a greenish tint to it, so I could see why maybe some people won't find this flattering. But again, like I mentioned already, I sound like a broken record. I just really like these built up a lot more in 2 and 3 coats because you just get more of the color built up and it just looks like a much more intentional jelly kind of shade. So here on 2 coats, it's still very sheer, but on 3 coats, it does build up a little bit more, though I still wouldn't call it like a crelly kind of formula. I think you could still see through to my nail line pretty clearly, but it just has such a light and squishy look. I think it's just the cutest, especially for spring. So I really like this one. It's just such a beautiful shade of blue. And last but certainly not least, we have Blackberry Rice Milk, which is a soft pastel shade of purple. And I might be wrong, but I think this one is the crowd favorite. It's honestly kind of a tie between this and I think the sheer pink. A few of them have already sold out multiple times at this point, but this is another one that I think is such a classic to have in your collection. On the first coat, it does give such a nice light wash of color that does counteract a bit of the staining because purple and yellow are complementary colors, so it sort of creates a neutralizing effect. But this specific shade of purple I think is just very light and airy and maybe not refreshing like some of the other shades, but it's just so pretty, just for lack of a better word. And built up in 3 coats I think is my favorite way to wear this specific shade because it's just such a beautiful hue that is so vibrant but still very soft and squishy, so it's very delicate, if you will. I think this would be such a perfect base for glitter toppers or just wearing it on its own. It's just such a stunning one. So I'm not surprised at all that this one keeps selling out right away. And here is a final roundup of the shades in 1, 2, and 3 coats so you can see them all together. Now moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Vanilla Almond Milk and comparing it to Cirque's Linen, which is their sheer milky white, but I'm also going to be comparing it to Zoya's Adel, which is another milky white in my collection that I absolutely love. I shared it as part of one of my winter favorites, and I'm not going to be including Funny Bunny because that one is just way more opaque for me. It's not nearly as sheer as these shades. So yeah, comparing these in 1, 2, and 3 coats, you can see that right away Zoya Adel is a lot more opaque and brighter, but Cirque Linen and Vanilla Almond Milk are pretty much dupes. I couldn't really tell them apart color-wise, and they had the same formula. Next up for Strawberry Soy Milk, I'm going to be comparing it to Cirque's Chiffon, which is my go-to sheer pink, but it looks a little peachy next to the shade. So I also have Olive Ave's Rose Quartz, which I think is much more closer color-wise, being that very white, milky leaning pink. And I also want to show it next to Cirque's Rosewater Jelly, which is from the somewhat recent Gourmand collection. I think this is a similar tone as far as the Cirque colors go, but it's just a little darker than Strawberry Soy Milk. So here on 1 coat, I feel like you can't really tell much of a difference. Maybe Rosewater Jelly is the most obvious. It's just a little darker and almost purple leaning, but once you build it up in 2 and 3 coats, you start to see the differences a little bit more. But I will say that Olive Ave Rose Quartz is the closest to being a dupe to Strawberry Soy Milk, but there is a very delicate blue shimmer in the Olive Ave shade, but it's like barely noticeable. So if you have that one, I don't think you need this pink. Next up for Chocolate Cashew Milk, I have this tiny baby bottle of Cirque Voile, which I think was from the Advent box, that's why it's like so tiny. But as you can see from the bottle, they definitely have very different tones to them, where Chocolate Cashew Milk is a little bit more of a warmer leaning color, and Cirque's Voile just leans a little bit more yellow, which is why I didn't really like it. I don't think it's just a suitable sheer for my skin tone. At least I don't find it flattering. I definitely prefer Chocolate Cashew Milk. Next up for Orange Pecan Milk, the closest sheer that I had from Cirque was their peach jelly, but as you can see, it is a little bit warmer and darker as well, so not exactly the dupe, but again, the closest that I had. So I also wanted to show this next to Olive Ave's Crystal, which is their warm peach leaning sheer color. And I did actually decide to also include Cirque's Chiffon just because it looked a little bit peachy compared to the sheer pinks from before, but this one is not quite as orange as Orange Pecan Milk. So again, here on 1 coat, you could kind of see just how warm Orange Pecan and Peach Jelly are compared to Chiffon and Crystal, for example. But once you build it up in 2 and 3 coats, you can really just tell those differences apart even more. So none of these are dupes for Orange Pecan Milk, but if you happen to have Peach Jelly or Chiffon, I think maybe you could layer them and get a similar look. Next up for banana hemp milk, the only other yellow jelly that I had is Cirque's Citron jelly, which is honestly one of my favorites because it, again, is not one of those warm amber jellies because I just don't love how those look. So Citron was definitely a favorite of mine, especially last summer, because it's just a very bright, like sunshiny kind of yellow jelly, while banana hemp milk is more of a white-based pastel sort of yellow. So I think honestly both of these are worth having. They're not dupes. Then for peppermint hazelnut milk, the closest shade that I had was Cirque's Jade jelly, which looking at them just in the bottle, I really thought that they were going to be dupes because they just look so similar. So here on the first coat, you might notice that Jade jelly is a little bit more opaque, but I do have a very thick, wonky brush on that one, where it is the round brush, but like just thick in the wrong direction, I guess, so it holds a lot of polish. But aside from the application, the color definitely still looks pretty similar, mainly on 1 and 2 coats, but here I did do a thicker third coat just to see if the colors actually are different, and I do think that peppermint hazelnut milk leans more minty, while Jade is very Jade. Then for blueberry flax milk, the closest to a sky blue jelly that I had is Cirque's Aqua jelly, which was recently re-released. But as you can see, even though they both are the same kind of color and formula, Aqua jelly is just a lot darker, while blueberry flax milk is a lot more of that white-based, almost like pastel jelly version. So these are definitely very far from being dupes, where I think you could justify having both of them. And lastly, for blackberry rice milk, I have a couple of bottle comparisons first, starting with Cirque's Ube jelly from their Gourmand collection, but this one is a lot brighter and darker. I feel like on camera they kind of look similar, but they're not at all. And I also wanted to show this next to Cirque's Lavender Sky, which is another absolute favorite of mine, but it's definitely more of a pinky orchid purple leaning shade. So the actual comparison that I have that I think is the closest in tone is Cirque's Haze jelly, but as you can see right away from the bottle, Haze is a little bit warmer and a lot more dusty leaning. So on 1 coat, maybe you can't tell the difference too much, but again, once you build up the color a little more in 2 and 3 coats, the difference is very apparent. So thankfully, blackberry rice milk is very unique to my collection, so I can't recommend it enough. I think it's so beautiful. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for the new Dimension Nails plant-based milk collection. As always, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this release, especially if you grabbed any already, because as of recording, there are a couple of shades sold out, but I know that Steph is working very hard to get them restocked as soon as possible. So I will have her website linked down below, as well as her social media, just to keep up to date with any restock announcements. But yeah, I am not surprised to hear that some of these are just flying off the shelves because they are just such classic sheers and jellies. You know that I'm a fan of jellies to begin with, and I love rainbow anything. So having this pastel jelly rainbow collection with a couple of solid neutrals as well is like such a great lineup, especially as like your first jelly sheer collection, you know what I mean? So I'm really excited about it, and I think these are just such fun shades. But as you saw in my comparisons portion, a couple of these are pretty spot on dupes to a few other sheers that I have. So when it comes to at least comparing the differences between the brands, let's say we're looking at Dimension Nails and Cirque, I believe they're both the same price, but you do get more product with Dimension Nails, and you also get a wide brush, which definitely helps with application. Though to Cirque's credit, at least with their skinny brush, I never had any issues with self-leveling or the jelly looking streaky. The only time that I had that was with Cobalt jelly from their like recent re-release, but Other than that, they usually are really nice to work with and easy to work with, but it's not going to be as easy as a wide brush. So yeah, you'll just have to let me know what you think of these, if you picked any of them up already, or just what your thoughts are now that you've seen a few more comparisons. Let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.